Ambrose Ridgeway had the cows out of the yard before his brother was 3 weeks dead. "You'll take the old cheese house on Sallow Bank," he said, loud enough for the hired men. "You've good hands, Martha. Stock wants a head." She had made every cheese sold under the Crowholt name for 11 years. Her name went on. None of them. The cheese house carried 14 pounds of rate arrears and a surveyor's notice against the loft floor. No cows, no milk, daylight through the roof. If she signed his paper, she kept nothing else. And the parish would have her in service by Michaelmas. She walked up that evening with her mother's cheese iron in her apron. August. And the yard thermometer had stood at 78 since noon. In the ripening loft, it settled at 52. She laid her hand flat on the stone shelf. It was cold the way a dairy floor is cold at 5 in the morning. There was no ice within 9 miles. No cellar lay under her either. The loft sat on open piers. She held her candle to the vent at the north end. The flame bent inward and stayed, steady, as if the wall were drawing breath. She stayed there until the wax ran over her knuckle. The opening was no accident of weather. Somebody had dressed that stone. A groove ran down the jamb, square and clean, the sort a joiner cuts when a thing is meant to slide in it. She put 2 fingers into the groove and found dry grit and no mortar. The loft ran 40 feet under a holed slate roof. Along the north side stood a stone shelf a yard wide, and the shelf was the cold part of the room. She walked its length twice with her palm down, the way you walk a hand along a cow's back to feel for heat. At the east end, her hand came up warm. At the vent end, it did not. She went down the outside steps in the dark and took the field path to Crowholt. The kitchen window was yellow. The dogs knew her and did not bark. Ambrose had the paper on the table with the lamp set on it and the salt tin holding down one corner. "Sit down," he said. "Susan, cut her some of that." "I'll not eat." Susan cut it anyway, put the plate near her hand, then went and stood by the fire with her arms folded, which was Susan all over. Rowe, the attorney in Whitmore, had drawn the paper in a clerk's copperplate. Martha read it twice. 20 pounds, her mother's furniture, and the clock. In exchange, she gave up all claim on the stock, the growing crops, and the tenancy of the 73 acres. There was a second line at the foot, added in a different ink. 6 pounds for the freehold on Sallow Bank. "Who valued it at 6? She said. "Rove." Roe's never been up there. Roe knows what a ruin fetches. Ambrose turned the lamp up, which he did when he wanted to look reasonable. "You've no herd, no lease, and no man. What would you do with a roofless ship on a hill? Make cheese in it." He laughed, and the laugh went on a beat too long, because Susan did not join in. Thomas had bought the bank plot 7 years back, at the sale of the old Bagley land, and paid 40 pounds for a half-acre and a wreck. Everybody had told him so at the time. He had written his will on a Sunday in March, 1 page, witnessed by Pritchard the carrier and by Job Whittle. It left his wife everything he owned of his own, which came to a silver watch and the cheese house. The tenancy had never been his to leave. It stood in his father's name, and then in Ambrose's, and the agent would not put a widow on a lease. "I want my cheese book," she said. "Which book?" "The ruled book in the dairy." 11 years. That goes with the farm. He did not look up. "It's the farm's record." Martha put her hands in her lap so that they would stay still. 20 pounds is fair," Ambrose said. "Ask anybody. I'll not sell the bank. Then you're a fool, and I'll want the house by the 29th. I've a man coming with a wife." Susan spoke from the fire. "Ambrose, the 29th, he said. Martha stood and went to the dresser and took from the second drawer a penny memorandum book she had bought with her own money at Whitmore Fair. It was hers. She would not be told otherwise about that as well. On the first ruled line she wrote the date, the 11th of August. Under it, she wrote 2 numbers and nothing else. 78. 52. Pritchard the carrier charged her 1 and 6 to shift her goods on the 29th, and he made her lift her own end of the bed. It went up the bank in 2 loads. A bedstead, 2 chairs, a tin trunk, her mother's brass scales, a curd knife, a cheese iron with a brass ferrule, and a dairy thermometer in a boxwood case that shut with a brass hook. £4 11 shillings in a purse pinned inside her stays. Nothing else in the world. You'll be back down by Martinmas, Pritchard said, coiling his rope. Likely. I only say it because folk are saying it. They can say it to me if they like. He took his 1 and 6 and went, and the sound of the cart died away. And then there was nothing on the bank but wind in the ash tree and a lark somewhere over the field. The place had 3 rooms and no comfort in any of them. The way house at the west end had a fireplace and a flue that smoked when the wind sat in the north. The press room in the middle had 2 stone presses, one cracked across the bed, and a beam press with the beam gone. The loft above ran the length of both, reached by outside steps, with the long stone shelf under the north wall and the wooden ripening racks fallen off their brackets. Nailed to the press room door was a paper from the district surveyor, dated the 3rd of March 1871, giving notice that the loft floor was defective and the building not to be used until repaired. 3 winters, and nobody had troubled to take it down. The rates were worse. £14, 2 shillings and 6 run up by the man Thomas had let the ground to for grazing and never paid. Snade the overseer had already been up once with his book. She swept and lime-washed the way house and put her bed where the smoke did not reach. She counted her money twice on the 2nd night and got the same answer both times. The trouble was not the roof. The trouble was that she had no milk and no way to buy a cow. No dairy in the parish would take on a woman whose brother-in-law was telling the neighborhood she had no head for stock. On the road to the pump, she met 3 women she had worked beside at every hay harvest for 11 years. 2 of them found something to look at over the hedge. Ellen Kite stopped. "Are you eating?" Ellen said. "I'm eating. There's blackberries thick on the far side of the bank." Ellen shifted her can from one hand to the other. "I'd come up, only our Wilf carts, for your Ambrose Tuesdays." "He's not mine." "No." Ellen looked at her properly then. "No, he's not." That was the whole of the welcome she got that week. On the 1st of September the wind dropped and the sun came hard off the slate, and by noon the yard glass read 76. Martha went up the outside steps with the thermometer and hung it on the shelf bracket and sat on an upturned pail to watch it. 53. She left both doors wide, top and bottom, and went down and scoured the press room for an hour. When she climbed back, the glass had crept to 55. She shut the doors. By dusk it had fallen to 53 again, and stayed. No cellar. She had been all over the floor below on her knees. Solid flags on packed stone, and the piers underneath open to the wind on 3 sides. She began to look at the vent instead. It sat low in the north wall of the loft, a foot square, with iron bars set into the stone. Behind the bars the shaft went back further than her arm. The air that came out of it smelled of wet stone and old water, like the bottom of a well. It did not slacken when the wind outside fell away to nothing. She fetched a knife and scraped the plaster from the wall beside it. Under the plaster the stonework changed. The north wall was 2 walls with a space between, and the space was not filled with rubble as a builder would fill it. It was clean, and the cold came up out of it. That night she lay listening to the flue smoke and did her arithmetic again. 8 gallons of milk a day would make 1 cheese of about 8 pounds. 50 cheeses would carry her to spring if she had somewhere cool to hold them while they ripened. She had the somewhere. She had no milk. In the morning she put on her good boots and walked 3 fields to Job Whittle's. Job Whittle kept 3 cows on 11 acres and a bad leg he had got under a wagon in 1849. He heard her out with his hand on the gate and his eyes on the middle distance. "Your Ambrose owes me for 2 loads of hay," he said at last. "He's not mine. He owed all the same, Job said, and would pay at Christmas if it suited him, which was how he paid everybody. He scratched his jaw. What are you offering? 4p a gallon. 8 gallons a day. Cash in your hand. Every Saturday. He gives 4p halfpenny. At Christmas, Job looked at his cows for a while. 6 of one, he said. Half a dozen of the other. Start Monday. She would fetch it herself, he said. He would not be seen carting milk up the bank, while Ambrose Ridgeway had his hay money in his pocket. She fetched it herself. 2 kits on a yoke. 3 fields. Twice a day. And by the end of the first week her shoulders had gone hard, and she had stopped noticing. The rest went out of the purse. 12 shillings for a second-hand cheese tub from the cooper in Whitmore. 3 and 4p for cheesecloth, 2 shillings for rennet, and a shilling to the smith to bolt a new bed on the cracked press. £3, 4 shillings left, and a summons coming. She made her first cheese on the 8th of September. The milk went into the tub at 84 degrees, warmed with a little from the pan, and she stood over it with the thermometer until it was right and not near right. Rennet in, and a stir, and then the weight. When the curd came, she cut it in squares with the knife her mother had bought her, and let it settle, and drew off the whey slowly, because whey drawn fast takes the fat with it. She tested it as her mother had taught her, on the hot iron. A pinch of curd pressed to the heated blade, drawn away, and the fine threads that followed told her the acid was where it should be. Salt at 3 ounces to the stone, into the cloth, into the press, and the screw down by a quarter turn, every hour until midnight. In the morning, she carried it up the outside steps and set it on the north shelf, and wrote in her book the date, the outside glass, the shelf glass, and the weight. 6 cheeses by the 14th. She turned them daily and rubbed them, and none of them heaved, and none of them cracked, and the rinds came clean. On the 15th she was clearing the rubble from under the press bed when the boxwood came out in her hand. It was a cheese print, 6 inches across, worn smooth on the back where a thumb had gone for years. Cut into the face, reversed, were 2 letters and a word. E. B. And under them, Bank. She was still holding it when a shadow came across the doorway. You'll want a scrubbing brush to that, said an old woman in a black bonnet, leaning on a stick. There'll be 40 years of grease in the letters. Who are you? Betty Naden. I skimmed in this room when I was 9-year-old. She came in without being asked, and looked round at the lime wash and the press and the tub. You've put it back near enough. That press wants its stone facing the other road. Whose print is this? Hers. Betty sat down on the chair by the wall, as if she had left it there herself. Mrs. Bagley's. Esther. She'd have your ear if you set a green cheese on the shelf without the print in it. There's no Bagleys in the parish now. There's none anywhere. The last of them sold up and went to Cheshire and died there. Betty put both hands on her stick. You've a good draft still in the loft, then. Martha stood very still. Say that again. The draft. Betty nodded at the ceiling. We opened at the bell and shut at the bell. 6 in the morning when the church bell went, and again at 8 at night. Mrs. Bagley had a handle for it. She'd not let a girl touch it. Opened what? Betty looked at her, and something went across the old face. And it was not confusion. Why, she said, the shutters. Betty could not tell her where the handle went. In here, she said, tapping her stick on the press-room flags. She'd kneel down where you're standing, near enough, and there'd be a noise like a pump going, and we were sent out to the weigh-house while she did it. Girls broke things. That was her way of it. Kneel down where? 60-year, love. Betty spread her hands. I could tell you what she gave us for our dinners. Martha got it wrong for 2 days and paid for it. She had it in her head that the cold came off water, and that water meant a well. A well would be at the south corner, where the ground fell away, and the wall had always been green. She hired Ellen Kite's boy, Wilf, 15 and long in the arm, at 1 and 6 a day. They lifted 11 flags in the south corner. Under them was packed stone rubble, dry as a road, laid by a builder who meant it to stay. Wilf broke a flag getting it up and looked as if he might cry, and Martha said it was her doing and not his. Which was true. 3 shillings gone, a broken flag, and 2 days she did not have. On the Thursday she walked the 5 miles to the estate office at Holmeswood and asked Mr. Denby for a sight of the plans. He was neither kind nor unkind. He charged her a shilling, sat her at the end of a table with an inkstand she was not to touch, and had the 1839 survey brought out. Sallow Bank was in the corner of the 3rd sheet. The cheese house was drawn square with its steps, and the half-acre round it was hatched. And beyond it lay the 8 acres of the bank field, which was Crowholt land and now Ambrose's to farm. Across the bank field ran a dotted line. It went from a small circle near the top hedge, down the slope, to the north wall of the cheese house. Beside the circle, the surveyor had written Sow Head, along the line, in the same neat hand. He had written air drift. Martha copied it in pencil on the back of an old bill, 60-odd yards by the scale, and thanked Mr. Denby, and walked the 5 miles back with the paper against her chest under her shawl because it had come on to rain. Next morning she went up into the bank field. The circle on the plan was a rush patch. Rushes in a dry field mean water, and there was a hollow in the ground beside them, a saucer 3 yards across that the plow had gone round for years rather than through. The grass in a ring about it was darker than the rest and stood longer. She was on her knees with her arm in the rushes when the dog came. "That's my field," Ambrose said. He had come up the headland with his stick. The dog circled her and thought better of it. "It's the estate's field," she said. "You farm it, which is the same thing to you." He looked at the hole she had cleared in the rushes, and she saw him look, and she saw him decide not to ask. £15. For what? For the bank and the wreck on it. 15. And I'll square Sneyd for the rates. And you can go to your sister at Nantwich with money in your pocket. You said 6 in August. August was August. Martha stood and wiped her hands down her skirt. "Why has it gone up £9, Ambrose?" "Because I'm sick of being talked about," he said. "There's men in Whitmore think I turned my brother's widow out on a hill." "You did. I gave you the choice." He put his stick under his arm. "Sneyd'll have his money by Lady Day, or he'll have the roof off you." "That's not my doing either." She patched the roof instead, because the roof was the thing she could mend. Job knew where there was reclaimed slate at the pulled-down cottages at Ravensmoor, and Wilf carried, and the 3 of them were 3 days at it. £2, 4 shillings, and the East End still let light in at the Ridge. On the Saturday she took £5 to Sneyd at the vestry, and asked for time on the rest. He wrote it in his book without looking up, and gave her till Lady Day. That left £1, 6 shillings between her and nothing, and 11 cheeses on the north shelf. She came in late that night, tired enough to sleep standing, and her heel caught the flag by the north wall, and the flag rocked under her. It had rocked before. She had walked over it 100 times. She knelt down and put the candle on the floor and ran her knife round the edge. And what came up on the blade was not mortar. It was clay, packed in with a thumb. Pritchard lent her the crowbar and charged her 2p for it, and told her again that she would be down off the bank by spring. The flag came up on the 3rd try, and she nearly went with it. Underneath was a chamber, 4 feet deep, stone-lined, dry, with 2 steps cut into the end wall. Cold poured out of it around her face. She sat on the edge with the candle held low, and looked at what her husband had bought for £40 without ever once going down these steps. The north side of the chamber was open into a stone gallery about 2 feet square, running away under the wall towards the field. Set across the gallery mouth were 3 iron shutters in a frame, side by side, each with a rack and pinion above it, and the 3 pinions on 1 square spindle. The spindle ended in a socket cut for a handle. There was no handle. 2 of the shutters were down and rusted into their frames. The third stood a hand's breadth open, and that hand's breadth was the whole of the cold she had been living in since August. On a ledge above the steps lay a box. It was oak, a foot long, lined inside with tin, and the lid had been beaten down over a lap so that the joint was tight. There was a smear of tallow still round the rim, where somebody had sealed it and meant it to stay sealed. Martha carried it up into the press room before she opened it, and set it on the bench, and washed her hands first, which she could not afterwards explain. 2 books, a folded plan backed with linen, a slip of paper. The books were ruled ledgers, half-bound, the paper foxed brown at the edges and sound in the middle. The first began on the 2nd of April, 1812. The hand was small and even, and never hurried. Wind SW, fresh. Yard 61. Shelf 54. Both shutters full open at 6, half at 8. Cheese 11 turned, sound, page after page of it. 2 readings a day. The weather, the shutter setting, the state of the cheeses, by number. In the hot end of July 1818, the yard glass had stood at 84 for 9 days together. The shelf had not once been above 56. In the margin, Esther Bagley had written, "Third shutter opened at midnight. Air keen. Took no harm." Martha read for an hour on her feet before she thought to sit down. The plan showed the gallery, 63 yards from the shutter frame to a stone-built head in the bank field, with the fall marked. A note in the corner read, "The drift to be swept every 2nd year at Michaelmas. The sow head kept clear of rush and beast." The slip was a memorandum in the same small hand. Counterpart of the deed of exchange, 1813, lodged with Mr. Pownall, attorney, Whitmore. The enrollment at the Manor Court. She turned the plan over. On the back, in pencil, in a different hand, coarser, and later, somebody had written, 2 shutters stopped. Lady Day 1857. J.H. Martha sat with that for a long time. 57. 9 years after Esther Bagley died, and 9 years before Thomas bought the place. Somebody had gone down those steps with a purpose, wound 2 of the 3 shutters shut, and gone away again, and taken the handle with him. She looked for the later books that night and did not find them. The box held 1812 to 1829, and no further. 17 years of a woman's work, and then nothing. And the woman had gone on making cheese here until 1846 at least, because Betty Naden had skimmed for her. In the morning she went down into the chamber with the crowbar and an oil can. The rusted pinions would not turn. She oiled them and left them, and oiled them again at noon. At 4 o'clock she got the bar into the frame of the half-open shutter and levered it up another 2 inches. Something dry and old let go with a crack she felt in her teeth. The cold came harder. She could hear it now, a low draw, like breath through a keyhole. She went up the outside steps and stood in the loft with the thermometer in her hand and waited for it to settle. And it went down to 51 and stopped there. 2 degrees, 2 inches of iron. She wrote it in the penny book, and under it she wrote a question, which was the first thing she had ever written in a ruled book that was not a number. Who shut them? And what for? In November, the Northern Counties Dairy Company put up a shed at Whitmore Road Station and began taking milk by the churn for Manchester. It changed the parish in a fortnight. Milk that had gone into cheese in a dozen small dairies now went into churns on the 6 o'clock train. The company paid by the gallon and paid monthly, which sounded like riches to men who had been paid at Christmas all their lives. The company wanted 1 man in each parish to collect and weigh and answer for the quality. In Sallow Bank, they took Ambrose Ridgeway. Job Whittle came up the bank himself to tell her, which cost him something, because of the leg. He's to weigh for the lot of us, Job said. And he says, any man selling milk off to a private party, is a man he can't answer for to the company. Meaning me. Meaning you. And you? Job looked at the gatepost. I've 3 cows, Mrs. Ridgeway, and a hip that's done. If they take my milk, I'm a man with an income. If they don't, I'm a man with 3 cows. Then, take their money, Job. I'd not leave you short in the same breath. You would, she said. And you'd be right to. Sell me what they won't have. The morning milk off the old red cow is too rich for their churns, and always was. He went away easier than he came. And that was the end of 8 gallons a day. Mr. Sourbuts of the company came up on the Thursday in a gig and a good coat. He looked at the roof, the presses, and the cheese on the shelf. Then he asked to see the loft, and stood in it with his hat in his hand for rather a long time. You've 51 degrees up there on a warm day, he said, coming down. In November. Granted. But you've 51, 53 in August. With what? With what's in the ground, Martha said. And I'll not say more than that to a man in a good coat until I know what he's come for. Sowerbuts laughed and sat down uninvited on the chair Betty used and came to it. The company wanted a cooling point in the parish. Churns must go on the train cold or they went sour before Stockport. Ice cost money and came by rail from Norway. Spring water at 50 degrees, running, cost nothing at all. And the company's surveyor had walked the bank field and seen the rush patch and drawn his own conclusions. We would take a lease of the spring head and the water, Sowerbuts said. 21 years. 120 pounds down. Martha kept her hands still on her lap. 120 pounds was the rates, the roof, the loft floor, a cow of her own, and 8 years of not lying awake. And the shed? Above. In the field, at the head. We would pipe from it. Then the drift runs dry, she said. And this room goes to 60. And the loft with it. There'd be no need of a cheese loft, Mrs. Ridgeway. That's my next word. The company was opening a factory at Whitmore in the spring. It would want a woman who knew cheese, and it paid such a woman 18 shillings a week. A wage, a roof, and no rates. And the small keepers? The company deals with the parish collector, who is my husband's brother. Who is the company's agent? Sowerbuts said. And that's a different animal. He looked at her over his tea. 120 pounds, Mrs. Ridgeway. You'd be a fool to want a week to think about it. I'll want a week. She took the week and gave the answer on the Thursday following, standing in the yard so that it would be short. No. Then she did the other thing, which cost more. She went round to Ellen Kite, whose one good cow had calved late, and whose milk the company had refused on that account. She went to 2 more women with a cow apiece at the far end of the parish. To all 3 she offered 4 halfpenny, cash on the Saturday. It was a halfpenny more than she could afford, and a halfpenny more than the cheese was paying her. By the 2nd week of December she had 38 cheeses on the north shelf and 9 shillings in the purse. The summons came on the 9th, for the new half-year's rate made in November. Snade had given her till Lady Day for the old arrears, and could give her nothing on this one. His clerk brought the paper up himself, and would not come in out of the rain. Martha read it through, and folded it, and put it in the tin box on top of Esther Bagley's plan, because that was where she was keeping the things that were going to have to be answered. Ambrose began carting on the 5th of January. Martha heard it before she saw it. A slow grind of wheels on frozen ground. When she got up the headland, there were 2 carts in the bank field, and 3 men with shovels. The hollow by the rushes was half full of stone rubble already. "You're stopping the sow head," she said. "I'm leveling a hole that's lamed a horse of mine." Ambrose did not stop the men. "It's my field to farm, and my hole to fill. There's a drift under it. There's an old land drain under half this parish. It's on the estate's own plan. Ambrose. Suvhead. Air drift. Drawn in 39. He looked at her then, and she saw him weigh it, and she saw that he already knew, and that knowing had not slowed him by a minute. "Then take your plan to Denby," he said, "and see whether he'll set a tenant's field aside for a widow's draft." They finished on the 6th. On the 7th, they laid a heap of muck over the top of the rubble, 20 loads of it steaming in the cold. Ambrose put a padlock on the field gate and told her the track was for farm carts. The loft did not warm. That was what she had feared, standing there with the plan in her fist. And it was the wrong fear. On the 9th, the wind came round to the east and stayed there. She had lived on that shelf since August, thinking of the drift as a cold thing. It was not. The air came out of the ground at 50 degrees in August and at 50 degrees in January. It had been holding the loft against the frost all winter, as it had held it against the sun all summer. Esther Bagley had known that, and written it down twice a day for 17 years. Shelf 49, Martha read that night, when the yard glass had read 22. By the 12th, the loft stood at 36. By the 14th, it stood at 30. She did what could be done. She hung sacking over the vent and the doorway. She spent 7 shillings she did not have on coal and burned a brazier in the loft for 4 nights, moving it hour by hour. She slept an hour at a time on the flags with her shawl over her head. The smoke got into the rinds of the cheeses nearest the east end, and she knew it would. Frost takes a cheese by the middle. It goes to crumb, and the body dies. And when the thaw comes, the rind splits along the line of the frost, as neat as a knife. The thaw came on the 18th. She went along the shelf with the iron and drew a plug from every cheese on it. 25 of them came out short and pale and broke between her fingers. 16 held. Charnock the factor came out from Whitmore on the 22nd, because he had spoken for the lot at £10.10 before Christmas. He tasted 4 and spat into the yard, and was decent about it in a hurried way. "I'll take the 16 at 3p," he said. "That's £1.12. I can't be seen with the others. Mrs. Ridgeway. I've a name in that market same as anybody. Take them. You'll be down off this bank by summer, and no shame in it." "Everybody keeps telling me that," Martha said, "and I keep not going." She went up into the field that night with a lantern to look at the heap, because she could not sleep, and there was nothing else to do with the anger. Ambrose had run a new rail across the gap by the gate, and she did not see it. She went over it hard onto frozen ground, and her hand opened on a stone, and the boxwood case came out of her pocket and struck the rail. The thermometer inside it was in 3 pieces. Her mother had carried it in that case for 22 years. She sat in the ditch with her hand bleeding into her skirt and let herself have 5 minutes, and then she got up and went down and washed the cut and wrapped it in a strip of cheesecloth. Hallowell, the district surveyor, came on the 28th to serve a fresh notice on the loft floor, 3 months to make it good or the building to be closed. He was a dry, exact man with a folding rule. He took the notice out of his bag. Then he stood in the loft in his overcoat and said, "It's colder in here than it is outside." "It is. That's not usual." "No," Martha said. "Would you care to see why? It'll take you an hour, and you'll want to lend me your rule." Hallowell put his rule down the gallery mouth and got 63 yards of dead air and a stopped end. He measured the shutter frame, the fall of the chamber, and the depth of the drift under the field. He wrote all of it in a black notebook. Then he took his own thermometer readings, because he would not use another man's figures. 50 degrees in the gallery behind the shutters. 31 on the shelf above. "Who filled the head?" he said. "Mr. Ambrose Ridgeway of Crowholt. With the estate's leave? He's the tenant of the field." Hallowell shut the notebook. "A tenant may fill a hole. Whether he may fill this one is another question, and it's not one for me." He put his rule away. "You'd want to know who has the right of the drift. That'll be written somewhere, or it'll be nowhere at all." Betty Naden brought the books on the 2nd of February. She came up the bank in the cold with a boy carrying a tea chest behind her. She sat down and got her breath before she would say anything. Then she said, "You'll not shout at me. There were 6 of them." half-bound ledgers in the same small, even hand, running from 1,830 to the autumn of 1,846. My mother was Sarah Naden, Betty said. She was in the dairy here 20 year. When the Bagleys shut the place up and built the new brick dairy by the road, they had been for burning whatever was left in the loft. Sarah Naden took the books home in her apron, and her husband clouted her for it. You've had them since I came in September. I have. Bettu. She had seen 4 women come and go off this hill, Betty said, every one of them full of what she was going to do, and gone by the spring. You've stopped here through a frost that killed your cheese, and you're still turning what's left. She put her hand flat on the top book. So you can have them. She knew about the shutters, too, once the pencil note was put in front of her. Hollinshead had taken the cheese house for a fodder store in the 50s and kept his potatoes on the north shelf, and the drift air had blackened them by Christmas 2 years running. He wound 2 down and took the handle off with him, Betty said. My mother called him a fool to his face in the road. Between the tin box and the tea chest, 34 years of one woman's work lay on the press room bench. Martha read till the candle went and started again at first light. It was all there. And it was not treasure. And it was better. The shutter settings through every month of the year. Which wind wanted which shutter. How the drift ran sluggish in a still frost and had to be helped by opening the loft door at the far end to draw it. The scald kept low, at 92, and the salt light, because a cheese made for slow ripening at 54 is not the same animal as a cheese made to be sold in 6 weeks. Loose between the pages of the 1,835 book was a printed ticket from the Cheshire Agricultural Society. First prize. Cheese. Josiah Bagley. Sallow Bank. On the back of it, in pencil, in the small, even hand, Jay took the medal up. I did not go. Made 40. One of the 40. 4 shone. Martha sat with the ticket in her hand until her tea went cold. Aldercroft the attorney had Pownall's old business and Pownall's old boxes in a room above a saddler's in Whitmore, and he charged her 7 and 6 for the search and made her wait 2 days. The counterpart came out of a bundle tied in pink tape, dated the 9th of June, 1813. A deed of exchange between Josiah Bagley, the elder of Sallow Bank, and the lord of the manor of Holmeswood. Bagley gave up a strip of 2 roods along the top hedge of the bank field. In exchange, a liberty was granted and annexed to the cheese house on Sallow Bank and to whoever should hold it after him. That liberty was to make, use, maintain and cleanse an air drift and sow head under the bank field, with entry at all reasonable times to clear the same. The rent was 1 cheese yearly at Michaelmas. It's enrolled, Aldercroft said, reading it a second time with more interest than the first. Manor Court, the same day. Mr. Tibb kept the rolls, and would produce one for half a crown, which Aldercroft called a scandal, and paid without argument. Then what is it worth? It is not a promise, Mrs. Ridgeway, and it is not a kindness. It runs with your land. He set the deed down. Your brother-in-law has stopped an easement. He has also, if I understand the company's printed form, put his name to an undertaking to supply a collecting station with constant cold spring water. He has. From a spring head he does not own the use of. Aldercroft took his spectacles off. That is a great deal more his difficulty than yours. The company's meeting to let the stations for the season was called for the 12th of February, in the market hall at Whitmore, at 11 o'clock, with the vestry sitting the same morning over the rates. Martha wrote out the 2 lines of the deed she wanted read aloud, and put the ticket from the 1,835 show inside the 1,835 book, and marked the page. The market hall smelled of wet wool, and there were not enough chairs, so most of the parish stood. Mr. Lyle of the company sat at the top table, with sewer butts on his left and a clerk on his right. 2 stations had been proposed for Sallow Bank, he said, and the company would hear both. The whole of it turned on cold water and a cool room. Milk that goes sour between here and Stockport is milk nobody pays for. Ambrose spoke first. He had a new coat, and he had learned his piece. Crowholt had stood in his family since his grandfather's time, he said. 73 acres, a new chippon going up, and the spring in the bank field. I'll pipe it to the road at my own charge. He finished. The company shall have its water constant, summer and winter, and my name to it. That's the undertaking assigned, Lyle said, turning a page. It is, then, Mrs. Ridgeway. Martha stood up. She had meant to speak, and she found she could not do it as well as Ambrose could. So she did the other thing. My attorney will read a deed, she said. And then I'll answer any question in the hall. Aldercroft read it standing, in the flat voice attorneys keep for documents. He came to the words liberty to make, use, maintain and cleanse an air drift and sow head under the bank field, yielding 1 cheese yearly at Michaelmas. There was a noise in the hall like a held breath let go. Mr. Tibb, who had been paid half a crown and was enjoying himself, unrolled the Manor Court roll on the table and put his finger on the entry of June, 1813. Enrolled, he said. The same day. It runs with the cheese house. Lyle looked at Ambrose. Mr. Ridgeway, whose is the spring? It's in my field. That is not what I asked you. It's an old drain, Ambrose said. I told your surveyor so in November. It lamed a horse of mine and I filled it. Any man here would have done the same. Mr. Hallowell, Lyle said. You are the district surveyor. You have measured it. Hallowell opened his black notebook and read from it without expression. 63 yards of stone-built gallery, 2 feet square, running from the cheese house to the head in the bank field. 3 iron shutters on a rack and pinion, 2 of them stopped with rust and dated in pencil to 1857. The head filled with cart rubble on the 5th and 6th of January, and covered with 20 loads of manure on the 7th. And your readings, Mr. Hallowell, on the 28th of January, 50 degrees in the gallery behind the shutters. 31 on the shelf above. The frost had gone through the whole of the stock. He shut the book. Before it was stopped, that loft was at 53 in August. I did not take that reading myself. It is in the books. Whose books? Mrs. Esther Bagley's, Martha said. Kept twice a day from 1812 to 1846. And mine, since September. She put the 2 books on the table, and the 6 from the tea chest, and her penny memorandum book on top. Lyle turned the leaves of the 1818 book, and stopped at the 9 days of 84 degrees. He read it, then turned it round so that Sowerbutts could read it too. Betty Naden did not stand up, because of her knees, and nobody made her. We opened at the bell and shut at the bell, she said, in the voice she used in church. 6 of a morning and 8 at night. Hollinshead stopped 2 of them in 57 because the cold went through his potatoes and took the handle away with him. That's the whole of it. Martha put the ticket from the 1835 show on the table in front of him. And the prizes? Lyle said. She made them, Betty said. He carried them up. The ticket went round the table, and the pencil on the back of it went round with it, and Ambrose sat looking at the middle of the table with his jaw set. Denby spoke for the estate at last, in the tone of a man cutting a loss. The estate would not defend the filling of that head, he said. The right was enrolled, and the estate's own survey of 39 showed the drift. Mr. Ridgeway will clear the hollow and the muck at his own charge, under Mr. Hallowell's eye. If it is not done by Lady Day, the estate will do it and charge him. And the season's cheese? Aldercroft said. 25 destroyed, the season broken, the loft floor to be made good under notice. Ambrose settled in the corridor 20 minutes later. For £25. Rather than be sued in open court at Chester, in front of the same men, the company took the bank for its station, on Martha's terms. She had written them on the back of the same old bill. Milk weighed publicly on the platform at 6:30, paid in cash on the Saturday, and no man's milk refused for whose land it came off. Name for the book? The clerk said. Bagley's Bank. He wrote it. and looked up. "How is that spelled?" Ambrose's men cleared the hollow in the first week of March, with Hallowell standing in the field in his overcoat and a rule under his arm. It took them 4 days to take out what had gone in 2. Martha was not there for it. She was in Whitmore with Amos Thorley the smith, holding a candle over a drawing of a square socket while he forged a handle to fit. It cost her £2.15 with the new pinion and a day of the smith's time. She carried it home across her shoulder like a yoke, went down into the chamber, and set it in the spindle. The noise it made when she wound the first shutter up was the noise Betty had remembered for 60 years. A slow, dry knocking, like a pump going. Wilf Kite crawled the drift with a lamp and a sack because he was the only one thin enough. 63 yards up and 63 back, twice, and out at the field end black to the elbows, and paid 5 shillings, and pleased with himself for a fortnight. There were 2 barrow-loads of silt and a dead jackdaw in it. Nothing else. The stone was as sound as the day it was set. The £25 went where it had to go. £11.10 to Kelsall, the joiner, for new joists and a boarded loft floor, which satisfied the notice and let Hallowell take the paper off the door. £9.14 and 6 to Sneyd, which cleared the arrears and the rate together and gave her the receipt to prove it. £2.15 for the handle. The rest went on salt and a second-hand press that wanted a new screw. By May there were 22 small keepers bringing milk to the platform at 6:30. The scale stood in the open where anybody could read it. Ellen Kite called the weights out loud, and Martha entered them and paid on the Saturday out of a japanned box. If a man thought he had been done, he was welcome to weigh his own can. Nobody ever asked twice. The company's churns went down to Whitmore Road on the 7 o'clock cart, cooled in a stone trough that the drift air ran over. Lyle wrote in September that Sallow Bank had sent no sour milk all summer. He could not say the same of 2 stations further up the line. What went into cheese was what the churns did not want. Late-calved cows, thick evening milk, the odd gallon from a woman with 1 cow and a sick child. It made 40 pounds of cheese a day in June. She took 3 halfpence in the pound for making and ripening, and the small keepers took the rest. Pritchard the carrier told the whole parish it could not last. He still charged her 2 pence for the loan of a ladder. Betty Naden sat in the doorway on the warm days with her stick across her knees and told Wilf he was doing it wrong, whatever it was. She was fed at noon and would not be thanked for the books. Ambrose sent his milk to the platform like everybody else, because the station was where the station was. He weighed in behind Job Whittle on the first Monday, and neither of them said anything at all. In July he came up with a parcel under his arm and put it on the bench. "Susan found it in the dairy," he said. "It's yours. It's got your hand in it, front to back. 11 years of cheeses in a ruled book, and her writing on every line." "Thank you," Martha said. "I'd have paid the 25 in the hall," he said. "I'd not have gone to Chester." "I know." He stood a moment longer, looking at the loft steps, and then he went down the bank, and that was as much as ever came of it. At Michaelmas she carried a cheese to Mr. Tibb at the Manor Court and had the rent entered on the roll, 1 cheese, yielded yearly, as it had been entered in 1813 and not since 1848. Tibb made a small ceremony of it and ate a good deal of the cheese. Every cheese that came off her press that year went to the shelf with the boxwood print pressed into the top of it. E.B. And under it, Bank. She had thought about cutting a new print with her own letters on it and had decided against it, and could not have said why in a sentence, and did not try. In the front of her new ruled book, she had written 2 dates, 1780 and 1848, and a name, and under that her own. On the 9th of August, the yard glass read 80 degrees by 2 in the afternoon. Martha went up the outside steps with the day's figures in her head and stood in the doorway of the loft. 206 cheeses on the racks and the long north shelf turned that morning, the rinds coming gray and even. The new thermometer, bought at Whitmore for 4 and 6, had settled where the old one settled every summer day of its life. 53. She wound the north shutter down to a half for the night, hung the handle on its nail beside the door, and went down to weigh the evening milk.